Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that focus on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild families, communities, and relationships. Our YouTube platform provides us with the space to have discussions on all topics that relate to families, communities, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the way that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures in order for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, that also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, in order for our children to thrive. Now, for those of you who are particularly curious and interested in this topic, we do also write thought pieces every other Sunday. We just posted one this past Sunday, so definitely be sure to check that out once you're done watching this video. Now, as is the YouTube convention, please do subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you're aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like our content and you want to keep those conversations going, like, comment, and share this video. Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome back. This is video 2 on our week of mental wellness. Hopefully you were able to join us on the first video on mental wellness this week. We did a fun little stretch of my own invention, so I hope that you enjoyed that if you were able to participate, and if you haven't, definitely check that out after this video. And in this video, I'm going to provide you with 5 strategies to help you communicate your boundaries. I've been talking, I think, the theme of all of my videos is about boundary setting and then respecting and enforcing those boundaries. And of course, that translates differently depending on the context and the situation. And in this video, we're going to dive into my top 5 tips, or the top 5 ways that I manage, enforce, and communicate my boundaries. So the first way to communicate your boundaries, this is really the chef's kiss of boundary setting, and that's no. Just saying the word no. It's simple, it's elegant, it's to the point, and it, in no uncertain terms, communicates your boundaries. Now, this is my favorite way of communicating my boundaries, and it also happens to be the toughest way to communicate one's boundaries. Why? Because we've been socialized to not disappoint. We've been socialized to be agreeable, and saying no immediately makes us come across as being disagreeable, and I'm letting you know it is further from the truth. So for those of you who are uncomfortable with the word no, this is the year that we get comfortable with it. If you feel like saying no, but you feel inclined to use more words to communicate your no, resist that urge and just say no. And now when you say the no, there are a couple of rules of engagement so that your no is effective and that it sticks. So the first rule of engagement: once you say no, you will keep silent and not try to fill the void that inevitably comes after the no. People generally aren't accustomed to hearing no because we've been socialized to veer away from it. So when that silence comes, sit quietly and calmly and let the no sink in. It's very important that you do this so you don't find yourself backpedaling on your own boundary. The second is feeling the need to justify your no. You do not need to justify your no or provide any reasons for it. Your no communicates everything that it needs to about how we move forward. If we get to the point where we're actually comfortable saying no, we feel like we have to justify it or explain it away. And the more words you use, the less likely it is that you're going to stick to your guns. So it's very important that once you say no, you stop there. You don't provide any further clarification or justification or reasoning unless the context absolutely requires that you do so, and then you keep it short and simple. Very important. And the third thing that people do that is a mistake when it comes to saying no is they allow the conversation to continue. Once you've said no and you've established the way that that's going to translate moving forward, perfect opportunity to pivot the conversation to something else. There's no point in continuing a conversation around a topic where you've already stated your position. You've stated your position, time to move on. So the very first tip, and I'm sure you saw it coming, of course, in communicating one's boundaries, especially for those of us out there who feel really uncomfortable with saying no. We need to get comfortable saying no, and no, again, chef's kiss of boundary setting. So simple, so straightforward, and so within your reach. So let's definitely start things off with no. The second tip that I have for you as it relates to communicating your boundaries is what I like to call the 3-strike rule. As I've mentioned in a few videos, we are all works in progress. Not one of us is perfect, myself included. I'm sure that I have breached someone's boundaries at one point in time by accident, and I'm sure that I may have slipped up and done it a second time. So I believe in the 3-strike rule. So I give you 2 opportunities to breach my boundaries, and the 3rd strike, you're out. And it's very cut and dry, it's that simple. And why is that? It's because I can't see a world where one values my relationship or values the time they spend with me, but doesn't feel the need to value my boundaries. So, if the relationship is to grow, if it is to have some sort of future, then my boundaries are non-negotiable. They're not things that I sway from. So because to err is human, I'll give you 2 strikes. But because my peace is much more important to me than maintaining a relationship with someone who doesn't feel inclined to respect my boundaries, I incorporate the 3-strike rule with pretty much everyone. And it makes things very simple, it makes things very straightforward, and it's a way of communicating self-respect. And it's funny because a lot of people are very affronted and they're very offended when they find that they're no longer part of my inner circle. It's like, oh, you have a problem with me respecting myself. That's interesting. All the more reason for this relationship to be part of my past. So definitely incorporating the 3-strike rule, and make sure that you're open and communicative. It's not fair to put someone on the strike system if they don't know what they're being sort of evaluated against. So it's important that you do use your voice and you do communicate your boundary, how that boundary was breached, and what you need from them moving forward. And you give them at least 2 chances, 3rd time, out of the gate. And out of the gate because you're making room for people who, without a doubt, have no issues respecting your boundaries and playing within those limits. And it's funny because a lot of people don't respect their boundaries. So there are people who just don't have boundaries, and sort of they allow people to kind of do whatever they want, and that's your journey. But there are some people who have gotten to a stage where they're able to communicate their boundaries, but if they get breached, nothing happens. There are no consequences. So because I am someone who communicates my boundaries and also enforces my boundaries, a lot of the times people might misconstrue my reactions as, oh, she's cold, she has no feelings, she's, insert word of choice here. And I'm none of those things. I just love myself, I respect myself, and I value relationships that reflect love and respect. If those aren't the relationships that I have with you, then those relationships are going to be in the past. All right, so moving along. So the 3rd tip for protecting your boundaries is physical disengagement. So I find that if I'm communicating my boundaries and it's falling in deaf ears and this person's really not listening, nor do they care, and they're being very dismissive, then I'm going to physically disengage. And this is going to be in my language. It will be with my body language as well, where I'm just going to physically remove myself from that setting altogether. And even in professional settings, I think there are ways to disengage and create distance from people who really have no respect for your boundaries. Although this is more so in personal settings. So I don't feel the need to stand my ground, so to speak, by way of like, I'm going to stay here and tolerate abuse. A lot of the times if I communicate that I'm not appreciative of some of the language you're using or some of the things that you're doing and you don't listen, I'm going to create distance between myself and that person. And this is especially important when people are baiting you. So it's one thing if someone just doesn't realize that they're breaching your boundaries, but sometimes you're going to come across people who are baiting you and who want to kind of create an issue with you or start an argument with you. And if I recognize that this is really what's happening and I'm being baited, they're socially written off. That person and I are not going to engage with one another moving forward. And if it's in a professional setting, I will navigate accordingly with the intention of maintaining a certain degree of distance between myself and that person just to protect my mental wellness. So the fourth tip that I have for you today is CPRing your relationships. And this is actually a model that I was able to get from the book Crucial Conversations by David Covey. I'm going to put a link down below in case I got the author's name incorrectly, but he actually wrote a series of books that talk about different communication tools that have really been helpful for me in my life. So I'll walk you through the CPR method. So the first one, C, is about content. So the first time that someone breaches your boundaries, you just focus on the content. You let them know, when this happened, this was the impact that it had on me, and this is what I would appreciate moving forward. Or the two of you can collaborate together on what the next steps are moving forward. Now, if once you've received this confirmation from them and you're going to collaborate together to make sure that your boundaries are sort of respected moving forward, if it happens again, we're all works in progress. None of us are perfect and sometimes we make mistakes. The second time you're going to talk about it though, you're going to up the level a little bit. So you're going to talk about the pattern of behavior that's establishing. So with this, it's very important that you're evidence-based. So you make sure you come with the specific examples. The more details you have, the better, on the fact that this is starting to build into a pattern, that you've already had a conversation about it, and it's important that you are very explicit. It's not helpful if you have someone sort of in your head as this person's breached my boundary. They need to know they've breached your boundary to know that they need to navigate accordingly, because all of us have different boundaries. We're all different people. So anyway, so you must have done C first, so focus on the content in the first conversation. And if it keeps happening, you talk about it being a pattern of behavior, and you ensure that you're evidence-based. So you provide the specific examples where your boundaries were breached. And then if this continues to happen and they continue on breaching your boundaries and being disrespectful and dismissive, you talk about now is impacting the relationship, which is the R in the CPR. So it's like, this is negatively impacting the relationship. I spoke to you about this behavior. I talked about it becoming a pattern of behavior. And at this point, the relationship has been harmed. My trust isn't there. There's no transparency, whatever the case might be, but you use CPR as a model to properly approach the issue and the escalation in the issue if you find that you're not being heard. So I'll make sure I provide the link down below. It's a great read. It's a great series, and it's definitely helped me in establishing and maintaining my boundaries in my life. Now the last one, number 5, and this is sort of the last resort when you're dealing with someone who's very unreasonable and who won't take no for an answer. At this point, you reflect it back at them, and not by way of lowering yourself to their level, but you ensure that they understand, they learn the lesson that breaching people's boundaries is not okay. And this might mean involving other people. This might mean, escalating to someone who has the power and the authority to have them respect your boundaries. And I find that a lot of the times when people breach your boundaries, conversations are enough, or distance is enough. But for those who want to stay in your life but don't want to respect your boundaries as well, and some of these situations can be very dangerous, then if escalation is required, it's required. I mean, none of us deserve to live in terror or to live in fear. So if we're not able on our own to establish that boundary, then it's important that we make sure that we involve the required people to make sure that those boundaries are respected. And the situation and the context will tell you what you need to do. And be brave, be courageous. You don't need to live in fear, and it's not okay that anyone thinks that it's appropriate to have someone living in fear. So it's important that you know that you are worth defending and protecting your personal boundaries with those around you. I'm someone, I do not like confrontation at all. I'm not someone who enjoys it. And in fact, my sort of the degrees of responses that I have by way of my stress responses is freeze, flight, and fight. But I realized with time, with age and maturity, that if I have to fight, if I have to sort of really put in the work to ensure that people understand that my boundaries are non-negotiable, that they need to be respected if you want to create room in my mental space or in my physical space even, then especially because I'm small and I find that I look like easy pickings, then I'm going to get creative, I'm going to be strategic, and I'm going to ensure that I'm effective. I think sometimes people are brought into your lives to teach you lessons. Other times people are brought into your lives because you have the power within you to teach them a lesson. So when it comes to your boundaries, know that they're non-negotiable. Know that it's more than just communicating your boundaries. Sometimes with certain people, especially if they're, in my opinion, barbaric, and they won't take no for an answer, but they won't deal with the reality that if you don't respect my boundary, you can't stay in my life, then you have to sort of use the toolkit that society has provided you and that you have within yourself to ensure that they learn the lesson that respecting the boundaries of other people is non-negotiable. For me, this is the last resort. I prefer to disengage and I prefer avoidance. I think I've mentioned that in a couple of videos, but I stand my ground. So if me creating distance and kind of giving you that space, and if that's not enough, if it's me that you're looking for, you want to kind of beat me down for whatever reason, that for me is absolutely not tolerated. And again, be creative, be strategic, make sure that you're effective, because if it is your role to teach this person a lesson, it's important that they get an A+. So all of that to say, those are my top 5 tips on how to communicate your boundaries to those around you. I'm sure you have some that you'd love to share with me, so definitely make sure you comment down below or leave me an email. I think this might need a part 2 or part 3. These are definitely the top 5 that I kind of rotate between, but I'm sure there are more. And I think as we continue this journey together, we'll become well versed in all the different ways that we can communicate our boundaries to those around us and to create inner circles with people who respect and value our boundaries and therefore deserve a place in our life. So all of that to say, I hope that this was interesting. I hope it was informative. And until next time, I'll see you soon.